Live. Let's see. Yay. Okay, there I am. All right. I didn't tell anybody about this. All right. I just wanted to get used to streaming again, but also show some of the updates that I got going on, especially since the greatest thing in the world is happening. Subtext and Dramatica are coming together, which Subtext has always been Dramatica theory anyway, so that kind of makes sense. But uh, I sent out an email earlier today about the terminology changes, which I know a lot of people will be very, very happy about, um, especially those who have been in the Dramatica community for decades. They'll be happy to see a little more clarity as far as like live, not live, as far as the actual, uh, sorry, the actual clarity in terms of writing it out for humans as opposed to writing it for AI. So I've been very busy putting all this merger together. All right, so let's see. Oh, I have to share screen. So let's try this. And I think this will work. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. That's not it. Let's see. That was the wrong one. Let's try sharing this one. There we go. Alrighty. Let's see if that comes up. It'll pop up here in a second. And come on. No? Interesting. There it goes. Weird. Okay. So, what am I doing here? Okay, so I wanted to show you some stuff that I've done because of the new terminology changes and updates and putting everything kind of back the way uh, God intended it to be. I I went through and did a test and it actually came out really cool. And what I haven't done yet is because I've been doing this whole merger thing, I have not done any evals on using 4.1 to run through and when it generates like story beats or story points, all the good stuff that you get out of Dramatica. I haven't had a chance to run through the evals on it, so I don't know how much better it is, except my own personal experience, which I thought was pretty cool. And that's what I wanted to show here. So let me bring this up. Hopefully it won't disappear. Okay, I think it's good. Let's see. So this was the conversation I had earlier today. And some really, really good things are coming out of the merger and update. There's a whole new update of the entire app. So I'm rewriting pretty much 8 years of uh, technology and upgrading it and integrating everything so that we can just have one place where all the Dramatica stuff is, Dramatica platform. So consequently, doing that, it's going to be way faster. Like this thing that takes forever just to load up conversations. Jeez. All right. It is instantaneous compared to this. Oh, okay. So let's go up to the top here. So this was me just going through and trying out to see because what had happened is when I did all the stuff with like the universal narrative model, which is what we used to call what is now narrative context protocol, it just would get really complex. And I liked the results of it. So the training in the background is much better. So it gets to a story form much more concretely and follows all the rules and does all that stuff. The only thing is when it comes time to actually read it, if you're a person and you're reading through it or you're kind of pitching it, kind of like what I'm doing right now, I would get tripped up. And so I assume everybody else would get tripped up as well. So the merger just made it possible so that we could just bring it all back to the goodness that everybody would like to see. So you'll notice right off the bat If you weren't a big fan of Catalyst Provocateur, even though that's a much better way to figure out the story form, or obstacle character or impact character, and you loved everybody seems to love influence character, especially the people who invented that theory. So I thought it'd be a good idea to put a big leaf out there and bring it back to the influence character, which is funny because I remember when that came up as a thing to replace impact character. So, oh, I should also do this thing. Let's see if I can open this in another tab. Let's see. Stop. Let's just do this. If I went here and I went to the story starters, so these are things that Muse things. These are stories that Muse generates once a day, and I'll kick it up once I get it all kind of worked out. But um, every night it goes out and generates a new story based on one of the story forms that are already have already been created. So in Dramatica theory, there's about 32,000 different unique story forms. So what it can do is it can grab one of those story forms and then get an idea of what the genre is. So this was just like a gritty crime thriller. And then just based on a basic log line, just made up completely, like a 2, 3 sentence log line, then it goes through and figures out what are known as the 4 through lines. This nice little like caption thing so you can understand what it's about, titles it, and then generates a really cool movie poster. So I had seen this inspired to like, oh, I wonder what that would be like. So, like for instance, this is the Night Bleeds, which is about a haunted Vietnam vet in the late 1970s. This is The Farmer's Stand, which is like one of those social justice dramas like Aaron Brockovich or maybe even Michael Clayton, although that's more thriller like, where it's a true story about this guy who went after Monsanto. Between the Drums is, I think it's a grandfather and his grandson. Father son in indie indigenous dramedy, low budget crime action, Hot Taco Run. Canvas is a really cool adventure fantasy where he steps into his paintings. Clara is a psychological drama that I was actually kind of surprised that Muse would go ahead and make, because uh, it has reminiscence of Lolita behind it, if you know that. 12 Dancing, and then right below it is a complete 180-degree change, which is just a Disney 1950s 12 Dancing Princesses. Here's some Arctic folk horror. So all kinds of different genres, all different audiences, but all going back to the of the 4 through lines. So I had gotten inspired by this Night Bleeds thing, and then so let's go back to Muse. And then let's go to all conversations. It should bring up, well, again, we got to wait 5 years for this to pop up. But I'll just walk through what I had done through Muse, and then I'll do some live stuff at the end of it just to show what it looks like in real time. Because I've been pitching Subtext slash Dramatica now for, well, pretty much the entire year, if not a little bit longer. And everybody gets really confused, A, because they don't realize that it's actually done and finished and you can actually use right away. But the other thing is the idea that it's not just for analysis. Everybody, the way it gets presented, it seems like it's just for analysis. But obviously it's for creation too. So currently, beyond saying and a lot, in Muse, there are two models. So there's subtext flow and subtext focus. So flow is meant to be just top of your head, system one thinking, creativity, let's just go, right? And it uses now GPT 4.1 behind the scenes. You can switch it when you want more detailed narrative structure, which happens a lot in Dramatica, and switch it to subtext focus mode, which is a place where it uses the reasoning models. So it uses O3 I only use OpenAI stuff. I don't see the point of using anything else. So it uses O3 to reason through. I've gone through and trained the crap out of it so that it knows everything I know about Dramatica and can help get to a story form beyond what it thinks it knows based on training. So this is the whole point of the platform, is to use the expertise that's been developed over the last decades to make better stories and not contribute to a lot more slop. So right now, this is a manual switching thing. So you'll either have it on flow or you on focus. The cool thing about the new platform, which actually works right now, is that it will automatically do it very intelligently and very quickly. And if you've occasionally come up with those errors, let's say like server errors, I was using an API from OpenAI that was very complex. It had a lot of benefits, especially in our domain, as far as the context of the conversation and being able to know or be able to keep track of everything that's going on. So it was great for that. It just had a lot of moving parts and would frequently fail, and it was really slow. So part of the last 2 months, I've gone through and switched to their updated API, especially since they're getting rid of the one that this exists on right now by the end of the year. So I have to make sure I have to do it anyways. But the benefit is there'll be many different muses, so different agentic stuff, and they hand off to each other, um, pretty much like an influence character handoff. But this person will be really good at theory, this agent will be really good at story forming, and they all mix together to create like this massively cool, intelligent thing. So super fast, they can talk to each other, opens up a whole new world of stuff beyond just, well, on top of the platform. But, yeah, cool. So just know that that is something that won't be like this forever. So in the beginning, I was just using Flow, and I could have taken the story starter, clicked on it, and then would have built it in the develop workspace, which is a different interface than this. But I wanted to test because I've made all these changes to the terminology. I wanted to make sure everything that was connected behind the scenes was still working because there's a lot. So I just like put I was thinking of writing a story about a Vietnam vet who drives the streets of LA in the late 1970s looking for trouble. Not exactly the most original idea, but it just struck me as something to do. Probably because I just seen Casino the other weekend, so I was in that headspace. So great concept, Jim. This setup bursts with potential for dramatic conflict, psychological depth. Okay, yeah. Let's start by sketching out the four through lines. So instantly, it'll break it down into the four through lines, which will have the biggest impact on any narrative development that you can do. So, objective story is the plot, the external conflict involving everyone, maybe the rising crime in LA, the breakdown of social order or a specific criminal operation. I would probably do the rising crime in LA. The main character is the Vietnam vet himself, his internal struggles, traumas, and motivations. That's good. Influence character, someone or something that challenges the vet's worldview, perhaps a compassionate social worker, a fellow vet with a different approach, or even a street kid he keeps running into. So that's the penguin. Relationship story. The dynamic between okay, so then this is the dynamic between the main character and the influence character. See, this is so much easier to pitch as I've been using influence character and obstacle character much more often than catalyst provocateur. But just so you know, it's still doing it in the background. The dynamic between the main character and the influence character, how they change each other. This is not entirely right. So that's part of the flow. Flow will get more things incorrect, but it's more fun, more creative. And then focus will get things more correct, but it's a little dry. So that's the great thing about the multi-agentic thing is it will um, you get both at the same time because they can talk to each other. To move forward, I'd love to know what drives your main character to look for trouble. Is he haunted by the past, longing for purpose, or trying to atone for something? Is there a particular antagonist, or is LA itself The opponent. That is lame. I would never do that. Does he find redemption or spiral further? Okay, once you give me a bit more on your main character and what kind of a story you want to tell, we'll choose your domains and start nailing it. Okay, so this is still, and you can see right here, I put the little wavy thing to show that this was made by Flow. So we're still in flow. I would say he's just trying to work out some of his demons through justified violent actions against who he perceives to be criminals. All right, great. So this gives your main character a strong psychological drive. He's wrestling with his own trauma, but channeling it outward through vigilante justice. This opens up a lot of thematic ground. So just by positioning those four through lines, you can start to shape the narrative and make it your own. So that's the other thing I'm really trying to push hard now with this platform is yes, you could a lot of people who know nothing about story are super excited about, hey, you could just prompt and then you could generate a whole novel. Wouldn't that be amazing? Not really. That sounds horrific because it's obviously being supported by people who've never actually tried to write a story or love film, love novels, and don't realize that it's not the end product that matters. It's the actual process of going through writing that is the idea of why you do it anyways. So it'll be like those Studio Ghibli images that everybody was freaking out about. Now nobody cares. Like the value of being able to generate a Studio Ghibli character has gone down to zero because like anybody can do it. They flooded it. Now it's like, okay, who cares? Because the charm and the reason why people love Studio Ghibli, is it Ghibli? I've never gotten it right, is the amount of work that goes into it. Like that's the whole point. And the care and the heart. Like, so I I don't see a world where AI um writes complete story. So you could do it. Not saying you can't do it. Not saying Subtext could do it, totally. But I see no point in doing that because A, it just sounds gross, and B, I don't think the end product will be that good anyways. So what the platform is set up to do is to help storytellers process, work through their story and develop it and like bounce ideas off of and have something that's like there to ground it in some sort of objective truth so that they can come up with anything. So you'll know there's not a lot of things there. I am changing in Subtext currently, they're called agents, narrative agents. I need to change that because agents now means something different in the world. So there'll be narrative tasks. So that's the thing where it goes through step by step and does a whole bunch of things. Like for instance, if you do the story starters, it goes through a bunch of tasks where it writes the main character through line, the influence character through line, relationship story, then blends them all together. So long form, you could do a whole task thing and write the whole story, but I don't see what the point of that is. All right. So this, okay, so it's going to sketch out the objective story in universe, LA late in the cities, or physics. Okay, so this one, if it's in universe, it'll be more about LA in the late 70s, which sounds more like a 1970s film, where physics, uh, the focus of the source of conflict in the plot would be more about the actual violence, whereas this is more like the state of things. So that has a huge impact on what story that is, or what kind of a story that feels like. So it's giving me the option of either, which is cool. And that's again, Flow will do that because it doesn't have enough info to lock it down. So it will give you a story form that actually doesn't compute because there's not enough information here to figure out a story form, which is good. All right, so main character in psychology, that's way wrong. He's trying to work out internal demons by externalizing them. All right, whatever. Influence character, someone who forces him to question his worldview, a social worker, a cop, or even a former comrade who's chosen a peaceful path. and it's putting it in the mind domain, which is interesting because, again, if you know anything about Dramatica, that would not work because these two are supposed to be diametrically opposed in the model. So, for instance, if I did go with this, he's like a psychotic guy, then the influence character would be in physics, not mind. But again, it's trying to do its best based on what I've told it so far. And who's to say that maybe this is exactly what I want is this mind thing, and then that'll pivot the main character to something else. Uh, if the main character is psychology and the influence character is mind, okay, blah, blah, blah. Does this influence character resonate? Okay. I would say, did I switch it back? Nope, I'm still in flow. Okay, I would say the objective story domain is in physics because I want it to be more about the revenge and that kind of stuff. And the main character would be in universe. I want him to be unemployable and trapped by circumstances. So his source of conflict is, his place in the universe is inequitable, kind of like what's his name, Rambo, sort of. Perfect, Jim. That gives us a gritty, grounded framework. So the objective story is in physics. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting pins into different through lines to kind of nail down where I personally want the conflict or the story to be about. Somebody else might do something different. So the external conflict will center around actions, which will be the vigilantism, crime, pursuit, violence, and consequences of taking justice into your own hands. That's super cool. And then put him in universe. Your Vietnam vet is trapped by his circumstances, unemployable, alienated, and stuck in a hostile environment. That's cool. So then it went through and did a little bit more of a draft. So it's just kind of building up iteratively what the story form is going to be. And then again, so here the influence character. Now it should have, if this was in focus, it would have said, well, it has to be mind because we've already locked these down. So then these other two are set. But it's giving me the option of either making it more about the influence character, their influence is coming from their fixed attitude, like what they actually feel or think, um, or psychology, um, which again, I would have to change this. Someone who adapts and copes differently with trauma. So they're like dysfunctional. That would be, they have dysfunctional way of thinking. So it's giving me the option to flip those around. And I think this is good, but then I think I did flip it. Okay, so I did flip it to focus. So I will switch this just to pretend that that actually happened here. Totally great. So then can you fill in the influence character and relationship story with what works to balance it out, what I already have for my vet seeking revenge? So a lot of times you might have an idea for a story, but you're not really sure some parts of it. So what you can do is you can lean on the theory and the framework to have it fill in the blanks for you. um, and not write for you, but at least start to give you an idea, concept of what that would look like, given what it is that you've done. In order for your story to feel balanced and for it to cover all the bases, you'll want to put, that's funny, put the influence character in psychology. Let's see. Here, the influence character is someone who possesses conflict internally, but in a transformative manner. So, this would be a case of where I did switch it to focus, but because there was no checking the work as we were going through, there's so much before it that has references to influence character and psychology that it's inferring this and trying to put this here. So I know that that's a issue. And if I tried to finalize the story form, then it would quickly put it out there. But I just went ahead and put those, but can you recheck them just to make sure I know I'm getting a valid story form here? So then it goes off and it thinks through and it says, well, let's take a closer look. You've put the objective story in physics, right? Main character in the universe. However, one of the key rules is that the main character and influence character must either be both static inequity sources of conflict, which would be the conflict is about how it gets framed. So, universe or mind, or both inequity processes, which would be the processing part, which would be physics and psychology. And see, it said in your initial idea, you propose the influence character as coming from psychology, which wouldn't match the main character's static framing. So that's it's an incompatible idea, right? So this is when you have to start making choices. Maybe I really think that's super important, so then I'll have to rethink the main character and the plot. But it went ahead and did this. To satisfy the framework, here's a revised and valid configuration that balances the domains. So that's one of the ultimate value grabs of the platform is it's always trying to help you write a balanced and complete story. So put the influence character in mind and the relationship of story and psychology. So why does this work? And this is cool because it'll tell you why. With the main character in universe, which is about static external framing, like he's got rotten circumstances, no money, nobody will hire him. The influence character should also come from a static framing source, but theirs is more internal. So then that's how you get that you and I are both alike because there are some similarities, but it's also very different. And that's how you project out your problems onto somebody else. So the mind domain fits that bill, both represent fixed conditions. Think of the IC as somebody who embodies a rigid, perhaps fatalistic view of life. So you can see he's completely unemployable and he's doing something that's like hopefully going to get rid of all these demons in his head, which is, go be a vigilante and do all this stuff. Meanwhile, in comes somebody else who has this fatalistic view of life, maybe an individual who's resigned to the system, or even someone who clings to traditional values, which contrasts with the vet's trapped identity. So they're trapped as well, but they're trapped in their head. And then that argument can come up like, are you really unemployable or is it just you're trapped in your head, like that kind of stuff? That's why it works. And then the relationship story is the balance to the plot. And that's the relationship most often between the two of them, but not always. Um, they'll struggle with internal processing where the vet's deeply held identity is challenged by the possibility of change or introspection prompted by his interactions. This is awesome because this shows how awful AI and training is in terms of understanding what the relationship story through line is. It's not about because of all the information it's been trained on, and probably because of other writing, the relationship our relationships are not us. There's something in between us and somebody else, or it is us. Relationships are not I working through in this relationship. That's main character through line. Relationship story through line is the relationship. So are they friends? Is a mentorship? Like what's going on here? Um, but again, because it's just defaulting, and that's fine in the beginning. I'm sure once I have ultimate power in terms of agents, I can really work on that. So the combination, okay, is one of the 8 valid configurations in the Dramatica framework. So that's super cool. Yes, that is great. Let me see what this Discord thing is. Is it super important? Let's see. It is not. It's Descript with another change. Does this revised configuration resonate with your vision? Totally. So I put, yeah, that's great. Sounds clear. I think for the concerns, I think I would want to do doing for the objective story. I'm totally ripping that off of, I think Taxi Driver is there. I'm pretty sure Clute is there. I think Silence of the Lambs is there, kind of in that area. So just because I have this autistic brain for story forms, I know what the feeling of all that will be. So I just jumped into this. Obviously, you would have to work your way to that spot, but I'm getting down to more of the honing in the personality of the story. So I think for the concerns, I would want to do doing for the objective story, meaning it's just the act of taking. Actually, it's also Dark Knight. Just the act of taking revenge is the problem. The act of being a vigilante is a problem, like just crime in general. Just doing the crime and whether or not you're really good at it and what that does to people. And so I figured he'll be the protagonist. He feels that if he does enough beating up of criminals, taking revenge, he thinks he'll finally burst through all the horrors he had dealt with before. Right. So that's what I'm doing there. Tells me it's a fantastic choice. And this is so much fun. It's so great to see this. In the Dramatica framework, it's a great sigh of relief. Using doing under the physics domain anchors your objective story in the realm of physical actions and tangible consequences. In your narrative, the veteran's belief that beating criminals is a form of catharsis perfectly exemplifies the functional theme of doing. So I have the different concerns grouped into four areas, which would be foundational, functional, latent, and deliberative. And that's the kind of forces that go on, like a functional force. And it just sets all the four through lines. Not only have I set what they are, but then they all kind of look at the same sort of conflict, but from a different point of view. So you'll see, I put physics and then doing. Oh, I don't think it did the concerns yet. Let's go. Oh, I put, yeah, can you go ahead and figure out the other three concerns for me based on this doing? So in the functional family, we have progress, doing, being, and preconscious. And, some people might not know exactly what that means. So then it will go ahead and explain it. So, in the objective story, the narrative thrust here is all about action. Your vet's belief that by doing enough, by physically beating up criminals and exacting revenge, he can shatter his traumatic past drives the external conflict. The world of late 70s LA with its palpable chaos and rampant crime is a stage for visceral, consequential actions. Love it. So, now to fit in with that, the main character concern will be progress. Either things aren't progressing fast enough or things are getting worse. Yeah, it reflects his fixed, circumstantial entrapment. Although he desperately seeks to move forward and break free of his past, he remains mired in the slow, grinding force of fate and circumstances. So the worse things get, the worse he's going to feel, and it's about that change of how things are devolving that is really hitting him. So it's less about the internal evolution, more about his external inability to progress through life. He's trapped in a cycle he can't break. Love it. With the influence character operating from the mind domain. So then to balance out progress, you would want to put the influence character in preconscious, which captures those ingrained, almost automatic attitudes that define their outlook. So you can think of this as like if you're not evolving, you're not moving past the fight or flight lizard brain. So this is the fight or flight lizard brain. And that's why it balances out progress. This character might exemplify a fixed underlying worldview where it's a fatalistic acceptance of the status quo or a deep seated unwritten code. And that's a really nice counterbalance to what the main character will be going through. And then their relationship encapsulates the internal state of existence and identity that emerges in the interplay between vet and his counterpart. So beyond just like we're going to focus on all the doing and all the really violent stuff that goes on there, then you want to balance that out with problematic being. So what kind of a relationship do they have and why are they not able to fulfill those roles properly? So I decided to do let's make the relationship a father daughter between an estranged child, and let's make the daughter the influence character. And thinking that she could be someone who's not numb, but rather going in the completely other direction, out of control, living on the streets, etc. So, with all of these terms, you can either have too much or too little of something. So, too much preconscious is like anxiety, flipping out, just flipping, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Whereas a lack of preconscious is somebody who's numbed themselves out. Both of those will work, but they're still focused in that vector, that direction. So I said I want her to be out of control, and then let's rewrite that. So I think it pretty much kept the objective story the same, the main character the same. Now this role is filled by his estranged daughter. Rather than being numb, she's the opposite, impulsively out of control, living on the streets, which will be a huge issue for him because now it's like role model, which I get. So role model, that's what the relationship will be about. In the mind domain, a realm of static frame of attitude and fundamental outlook, her behavior stems from deep-seated, unfiltered impulses, a chaotic counterpoint to her father's rigid entrapment. So she's all over the place because of her own entrapment, and he's physically out of the place, but doesn't even consider what's going on in his mind. And this one probably is more about see, this will be what I call he said, she said. As their dynamic unfolds, the father's static condition progress is set against the daughter's raw, unmediated existence. So, see how it's positioning the main character and then making that the relationship story? Pasha. That should have been progress versus preconscious. And then if I was helping somebody develop their story, I would say that's he said, she said, which is the I say this, we're being this. No, we're being this. And that's like horrible. What you want to do is look and see how how is their inability to fulfill their roles, being father, being daughter, how does that pull them apart or give them opportunity to come closer together? That's the compelling part. So all that set's good. Okay, so then yeah, so put all those in there, and then this is the fun part about developing it. In Muse, I said, "That's perfect. Can you generate an image, 16:9 cinematic, ultra realistic 1970s film stock, showing their first meeting in the rain on the streets of downtown LA?" And this is what it came up with, which I thought was really cool. I don't necessarily think this is 1970s film stock. It seems a little more modern, but uh, just having the visual of what this looks like allows me to like step into the story and then be able to write up all kinds of different ideas. You'll see, like I was starting to think of like, oh, what would that encounter be like when they first meet each other? That kind of thing, right? So, and this is using the new image gen from OpenAI, obviously. Um, and you can do this anytime you're developing stuff. You can do stuff, set like a visual style so you can keep it consistent. And yeah, I'll put it so that you can add up, character images and then have them in different places and all kinds of fun stuff. Um, but first things first, I got to make sure the multi agents work and the new platform's ready to go. So I just thought that was really cool. That's why I wanted to share this experience here of developing this. And then you can download it. Okay, that's perfect. What do we have left to figure out for the story form? Because I know it's not complete. So it just says you just have this stuff, but then you need to figure out what the story driver is. So just real quickly, that would be the major plot points, whether or not they're driven, like the actions are what's driving them, or the decisions that people make. And you want them to be like consistent. The outcome is, so all this doing, does he like succeed? Does he avenge, or does it end up in failure? And then the judgment, meaning like at the end, was it a good, redemptive, morally affirmative transformation, or bad, a failure in reconciling his inner demons? So for 70s, it's pretty obvious what I should do. Um, and then, so these are different terms. I'm not going to change it back to linear holistic for Dramatica because I actually have gotten really good feedback from this from people who've been around Dramatica for a while. Um, because anybody can think linearly and anybody can think holistically. This keys you in on the fact that this is a biological imperative. So, like the story form itself, if it's the model of a mind, that there is some sort of biology behind it during pregnancy that sets the model in a certain way, a tendency toward the mind to work towards a certain way. And so I co opted narrative alignment because it's like it aligns the preconscious filter of the mind as it goes through life and whether or not dopamine is the baseline, so cause and effect, goal driven, or serotonin, which is relationship balance and equilibration of inequity. So I'm going to keep that. There's another one that I don't actually ask for in this, so we'll just skip it because it's generally one or the other, one over the other. And then the main character pivotal element, because it's in that functional family of progress, doing, being, and preconscious, then there's a certain set of elements that would be the pivotal elements between character and plot, between the main character and the influence character. So it's making a guess as to what that could be. And then the resolve, this is also different from classic Dramatica, which is usually change or steadfast. And then I changed that to changed or steadfast because it was really about how it is at the end compared to the beginning. But you could do that a million years and the AI LLM reasoning thing will get close, but maybe if it's like 5 out of 10 correct in figuring out what that is because it thinks, well, yeah, every character changes. When you do this, it's like 10 out of 10. So does he hold fast? So in other words, instead of change, you have relinquished, which is abandoning that old way of doing things, or maintain. So maintain that perspective. And then that's the steadfast equivalent. The dynamic is important because even if he changes in some ways, he might still be committed to his underlying methods. That's actually really smart. Or conversely, he might have a breakthrough that shifts his entire approach. So again, it's the process. There's no right answer here. It's the one that I connect to, and then I set it, and then it sets it in the story form. So I would say success bad, because I was thinking 1970s. So success, he carries out all the revenge, everything, but then it ends bad. So very Dark Knight, probably Taxi Driver. I have to look it up again. Let's go with the dopamine model, just because of very cause and effect, and the resolve is maintained because I was thinking eventually the daughter would relinquish her approach. So then it sets those, gives a little idea of what each of those would do to the story, and then it redid the pivotal element. And I was going to mess around with it, but he said we can select his stance as test, indicating that he continuously challenges doubts and proves his own method as he confronts each obstacle. That actually was inspiring to me. That I actually like that, because knowing that he is test, that means the influence character would be trust. And so I put that sounds phenomenal. So he'll be testing the system the whole time, and she won't trust anyone. So while he's testing, 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 she's not trusting, not trusting, not trusting, and they don't see eye to eye. But somehow they come into conflict because those are the opposites. You can either challenge stuff or you can trust stuff. Even if you're not trusting, that's different than challenging, because you're going like this and they're going like that. All right, so I finalized your story form and saved it under the title Shattered Justice, which I will probably change. um, but then it went through, did the rest of the story form, and okay, so then I was inspired by that and by the photo, and this will probably give you a better idea of what the pivotal element is, and then I'll come to a conclusion here. But so knowing that his pivotal element is test and hers is trust, and that they're both ultimately wrong, can you? Oh, actually, you know what? Before that, let's just do this. So I asked up here and I said, can you finalize the story form and save it? So it went through, it does another check. And then once it does that, it's attaching the current conversation to the new story form, Shattered Justice. So down here at the bottom, this used to just be the title of the conversation. Now, this is the context of the current conversation. So you can think of this as like, we're in this story form of, I'm sorry, this conversation of conceptually a 1970s LA Vietnam vet within the story form of Shattered Justice, within the story of Shattered Justice. So a story can have many different story forms. Typically, like film just has one. So I'm just going to stick with one, but it took the conversation, or it made the story form, attached it. Oh, sorry, it made a new story, then uh, aligned, verified, validated the story form itself, attached that story form to the story, and then attached the conversation to the story form. So you can always go back to it. But then what you can do is if you tap on it, you get the actual story form page. And these are all the various different narrative aspects that go into the story form. But you'll see here it went through, it has his maintained uh, resolve, which means the influence character has to relinquish. We have the success bad, we have the action. And then, so just based on what I did, that conversation so far, it went through and balanced out the rest of the narrative to make it all work, because you want a balanced argument. That's why if you have missing holes or something in your story, it's because you have missing pieces. Because if you have these, this subjective story and this main character through line, and you have all these different things that they're going through, then in order for that to balance out, given the kind of story you're trying to tell, this is where the influence character would be. And this would be where the relationship story would be. And it generates a whole bunch of different things, all these different story points, like 70 plus different story points here that you can then, and it sets that context like, okay, this is your story. This is what you're trying to argue. So you'll see the main character pivotal element here is test, and then the daughter here is in trust. And because of the way that the story is set up, the reason why they're pivotal is because you'll see these are repeated in the main character. He's test and trust in his own personal stuff. Whereas the influence character, to balance that out, has the same problem and solution of the objective story. So cause and effect. So she might be in the place where she is thinking everything's a lost cause, and instead at the end she's looking more towards the effects. um, and she might get out in a better way than he does. Whereas his whole thing is, if he could just find a way to get it to end those demons, then he would be resolved and his life would be great. But he can't, because dealing with all this stuff, all the fallout of him being in Vietnam, is something that's just going to continue on and on and on and on. So no matter what he does, he's always going to be in this state of unresolvedness. So that's what this whole thing has generated. I know exactly the kind of things that he's going to be going through, where he's coming from. I have an idea of where she's coming from. Then I have what happens in each act. So now thematically, because of the way, because I want it to end in success and I want that feeling of bad, these elements that make up their through line go in a certain order in order to get that logical conclusion of success and that emotional fulfilling or lack of fulfillment of bad. So in the beginning, he's going to be trying to get through his past. There's going to be a lot of misunderstandings in the plot. Um, she's going to come back in and trigger all kinds of memories for him. And then they're going to try and be in this place where they can't quite figure out what kind of a relationship they have. And maybe by the end of it, they come up with a new idea of who they are with each other. That's kind of like what this is describing here. And again, I'm just bouncing ideas off of it. Somebody could have completely opposite way that they want to interpret these different thematic elements, but at least you have something that's grounded and works with all the other pieces. And then, of course, we have like some additional story points here at the bottom. So, oh, what I just to finish up. So then to go back to what I was doing with the conversation. So then if I go back to after I did the story form, all right, so I said, so knowing that his pivotal element is test and hers is trust, and that they're both ultimately wrong, I didn't want any of them to be right. Can you help me to start to think about what their positions on these two, what kind of arguments this might bring up with these elements underneath the surface? And I'm thinking of those classic you and I are both alike scenes where these elements face off against one another. So knowing what you know about them so far, what do you think? And this is a way just to test to test your story form and see if it's working for you. So it went through and said, okay, well, if he's coming from a place of test, that means his position is that he believes nothing is what it seems. The world, the system, even personal relationships, everything must be challenged and proven. Totally cool, right? All right. Underneath, this is a defense mechanism. If he's always testing, he can't be blindsided or betrayed again. Totally cool. And you can see why his daughter would also be kind of similar area. Classic arguments: you say you've changed, prove it. Words are cheap, actions show who you are. And I really like this. He might set up situations to test his daughter's loyalty, sobriety, resolve, sometimes sabotaging her progress by forcing her to jump through hoops. Because, and again, maybe their relationship is kind of dysfunctional because it's in that psychology domain. He'll be doing things to keep her attached to him and codependent towards him. So, all kinds of things to like test her loyalty, sobriety. And it's really important, I think, when you go through here to never ever specifically refer to those words in the actual dialogue or the illustrations or the storytelling or the final thing that you're writing, because it gets really hokey. You'll see, like you say you changed, prove it. Like if you said, I'm going to test you, you're like, anytime they speak the story form, it's really gross. So I would avoid that. Trust. She's lost faith in everyone, especially authority figures, including her father. Her instinct is not to trust. Maybe she's been let down, abused, or simply abandoned. Yes, totally cool. So here, this is why this is gross. Why would I ever trust you? You left. And that's like, oh, it's so cringy. It works, but maybe there's a way to say that without saying that. You only show up when you want something. Again, that's like, "Eesh." She might refuse help, run away, or sabotage reconciliation. And then it did. It's funny. It did. He said, she said, which is fine in this context because we're not talking about the relationship. I can't just take your word. You've lied, disappeared. How do I know you're not just playing me again? And then she says, you don't get it. You never trusted me, never believed in me. You always had to test me like I was something broken. No wonder I ran. All right. So that's afternoon special and very on the nose. And some classic face-off arguments. You keep making me jump through hoops. I'm not your mission. I'm your daughter. So that was interesting. If I don't test you, how do I know you won't end up dead in a gutter? That's a cool sentiment. I probably would maybe just cut off that first part. Maybe, and then for her, maybe if you trusted me, I wouldn't have to prove myself every damn day. That's super cool. In fact, yeah. And then I trusted you once. Look where it got us. So that's kind of cool. All right. Thematic payoff. Okay, so then here it's funny. It did the same thing I was thinking, which is the rain-soaked confrontation. That picture. He follows her, suspecting she's fallen in with dangerous people. She explodes. Why don't you ever believe me? And he responds, because the world doesn't care. If you trust the wrong person, you die. So the intent behind it is right, but that's what I'm saying. It's like now the art is finding a way to communicate that without actually coming out and saying it. So I put that was great. Would there be a way to imagine that scene where he's testing her sobriety? Because I kind of like that idea without actually saying the word test or for her saying the word trust. And this is what I wanted to share. So the real power of these thematic elements is in their subtext, not in characters naming them, but in the actions, choices, and tone of their dialogue. Here's how you might dramatize a test of her sobriety and her reaction without ever using the words test or trust. So here we go. Rain slicked alley, late nights. What's that image? He waits by his parked car as she approaches, drenched, jittery, and wary. She senses what's coming. So he, casually but eyes sharp. You look tired. You eating anything? Want to grab some coffee? So he offers her a coffee cup, watching to see if she hesitates, a subtle check for shakes for withdrawal. He's testing her, but he's not saying it. You see how that's like elevated it? Plus, it gives the actor something to do as opposed to like, I'm testing you. So he's just like, wow, you look tired. You eat anything? You want to grab some coffee? But deep down inside, he's testing. So she doesn't trust. So defensive, already knows where he's coming from. I'm not hungry. I eat. I'm fine. She takes the cup, holds it steady, daring him to notice that her hands don't tremble. So again, like, I don't trust you. So I'm going to be like, no, I'm not hungry. I eat. I'm fine. He, unconvinced, glancing at her pupils. Long night. Her eyes glaze. Is she fidgeting? Totally still testing. She, holding his gaze. Not as long as yours, I bet. She sips the coffee, not breaking eye contact, signaling, I know what you're looking for. He, pushing, where'd you sleep? He's fishing for an inconsistency, something that'll give her away. She, stiffens, voice tight. With a friend, not that it matters. She turns, showing her clean arms, no fresh marks. It's a silent challenge. See for yourself. He, softening just a little. You're all I got left, kid. He almost says what he means, but he can't bring himself to risk it. She, quiet and guarded. Yeah, I know. So that's super cool. I thought that was really, uh, really touching, and at least something that isn't so on the nose with like speaking the actual story form. And so you can actually see how a Dramatica story form elevates. Like this scene, if you were to like take this image and you were to have it write something, be really just like pretty basic and bland without an understanding of what is motivating them and what subtext is going on underneath the surface. That's why I called it subtext before, because that's really what a dramatic story form is the subtext that underlies the entire narrative that goes throughout the entire thing. Once you do have it, you can get the gross on the surface versions of it, and then you can have it go back in and then really do that. Like, I could have so much fun writing that out in a screenplay and then just really imagining it, not even thinking at this point, I don't need to think what's actually driving them. I just find really cool ways to get that across without ever referring to it. And it's like looking out of the corner of your eye at what the story form is without referring to it. So his test is in the scrutiny, the leading questions, the little traps. Want some coffee? His eyes constantly searching for proof, never outright saying it, but making her prove herself with every breath. And her trust, or lack thereof, is in her guarded answers, her refusal to offer more than what's absolutely necessary, the subtle ways she tries to show she's clean while making it clear she resents having to prove it. Extra touches. Maybe she snaps and throws a cup. You want me to pee in a cup too, or is this enough? I feel like I've seen that before somewhere, but that that's kinda cool. Or she simply walks away, leaving him with the unanswered question, his test unresolved. Oh, that would be better. "You're all I got left." I probably wouldn't do kid. That's a little too much. You're all I got left." And then she walks away. No, I'd probably have her say, "Yeah, I know." It's actually kinda cool. Yeah. So this kinda scene makes the test trust dynamic palpable, raw, and real, never needing to name the forces at play. So that's all I wanted to get across today. Oh, cool. An hour. Let me stop sharing. All right, so this is really fun. I just wanted to get back in the live stream mode, get used to it. I'm going to do them totally random, totally chaotic times whenever it suits me, and will work. And then people can watch them whenever they want to. So look forward to some really, really great advances as I merge Subtext and Dramatica together into the ultimate narrative platform. Go bring all the videos in. The community is going to be one place. Um, all the models are going to be aligned, and everything's just going to work seamlessly. Um, and then, yeah, the community, I'll have a place to bring it all together. And yeah, that's it. So, super excited about all the stuff that we're working on. It's really fun to finally be able to do this 100%. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.